November 18, 1944. Near the German border, west of Aachen, rain hammers the earth without pause, turning fields into black, sucking swamps. Private First Class Daniel Harper of the U.S. 1st Infantry Division drags his boots free from the mud one step at a time, each movement a battle of its own. The road ahead, if it can still be called a road, is nothing more than a churned ribbon of sludge, gouged by tank tracks and cratered by artillery fire. Behind him, a truck engine roars, then chokes. The wheels spin uselessly, spraying mud in thick arcs. A sergeant shouts over the noise, "Keep moving. Don't stop for anything." Harper doesn't look back. He can't afford to. The cold has already crept into his bones, and stopping means freezing, or worse. Across the shattered landscape, German Oberstleutnant Karl Weiss peers through a pair of damp binoculars from a half-collapsed farmhouse. His uniform is soaked through, his boots caked in layers of filth that never seem to dry. He wipes the lenses with a trembling hand, then squints again at the advancing figures. "They're still coming," he mutters. Next to him, a young replacement soldier shifts uneasily. "Through that?" Weiss doesn't answer immediately. He lowers the binoculars, his expression tightening. The mud is knee-deep in places. Supply lines should have broken down days ago. Vehicles should be stranded. Artillery should have fallen silent, but none of that is happening. In the distance, the low, rolling thunder of Allied guns continues without interruption. A steady, relentless pounding that seems immune to the weather itself. "They don't stop," Weiss finally says. "Not for rain. Not for mud. Not for anything." A shell whistles overhead, crashing somewhere behind their position. The farmhouse shudders, dust drifting from the ceiling beams. Harper hears it too, but barely reacts. By now, the sound of artillery has become part of the world, like wind or thunder. What matters is forward. Always forward. Ahead, a Sherman tank grinds its way through the mire, its tracks biting deep into the earth. Mud piles up around its hull, but it keeps moving, engine growling like a stubborn beast refusing to die. Infantry cluster around it, using its bulk as cover, stepping in its tracks where the ground is marginally firmer. "Stay close to the tank," a lieutenant calls out. "It's the only solid ground you've got." Harper follows, boots sinking with every step. His rifle is slick with moisture, his fingers numb despite his gloves. He glances to his left and sees another soldier stumble, falling hard into the muck. Two others haul him up without a word. There's no time to complain. No time to rest. From the farmhouse, Weiss watches the same scene unfold with growing disbelief. "They should be stuck," the young soldier beside him insists. "Our report said." "Our reports are wrong," Weiss cuts in sharply. He has seen the Western Front collapse piece by piece over the past months, but this is something else. The Allies are not just advancing, they are adapting. Their engineers lay down temporary roadways behind the lines. Bulldozers clear paths where none exist. Trucks move at night, headlights dimmed, guided by men on foot. And their artillery, always their artillery, never stops. Another rumble echoes across the fields, deeper this time. Weiss shifts his gaze and spots a column of vehicles inching forward in the distance. Fuel trucks. Ammunition carriers. Even in this hellish terrain, the lifeline of the Allied army continues to flow. "It's impossible," the younger soldier whispers. Weiss doesn't respond. He knows better now. Nothing about this enemy is impossible anymore. A machine gun suddenly opens fire from a hedgerow nearby, snapping Weiss back to the present. He ducks instinctively as bullets crack through the air, kicking up spurts of mud around the advancing Americans. Harper drops flat, pressing himself into the cold earth. The mud seeps through his uniform instantly, but he barely notices. He crawls forward, inch by inch, using every bit of cover he can find. "Move," someone shouts. "Keep moving." And they do, through the mud. Through the rain. Through the fire, unstoppable. Weiss lowers himself behind the shattered wall, heart pounding. For the first time, a thought takes hold, one he cannot shake. If they can fight like this, how do we stop them? The rain continues to fall. November 19, 1944. Rear Supply Corridor, west of Aachen, the rain has not stopped. Lieutenant James Callahan of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers stands ankle-deep in mud, his boots nearly swallowed as he signals to a bulldozer operator struggling to push forward. The machine groans under the strain, its metal tracks grinding against the saturated earth. Angle it left. Callahan shouts, waving his arm. "You'll sink if you keep straight." The operator adjusts, the blade cutting into the sludge, carving a shallow path that immediately begins to fill with water. It's a losing battle, but one they fight anyway. Behind them, a convoy stretches into the mist. Trucks loaded with artillery shells, fuel, rations. Some are stuck. Others inch forward. All of them are essential. A sergeant jogs up, breath visible in the cold air. "Sir, we've lost 2 more trucks back there. Axles buried." Callahan nods, already expecting it. "Mark them. We'll pull them out later. Right now, we keep the road open." "Road?" the sergeant mutters, glancing at the swamp around them. Callahan doesn't respond. Because the truth is, there is no road anymore. They are building it as they go. A team of engineers begins unloading wooden planks, rough, heavy, soaked from the rain. One by one, they lay them down across the mud, creating a makeshift surface. A corduroy road. Primitive, but effective. "Keep it tight," Callahan orders. "No gaps." The men work quickly, hands numb, uniforms soaked. Each plank sinks slightly as it's placed, but together they form a fragile stability, just enough for the next truck to pass. An engine revs. A supply truck lurches forward, its tires gripping the wooden surface. For a moment, it looks like it might fail, then it moves, slowly. Painfully, but it moves. Several kilometers away, Oberstleutnant Karl Weiss crouches in a defensive position hastily dug along a tree line. The mud here is just as bad, if not worse. His unit has been ordered to hold this sector, but holding anything in this terrain feels like trying to grasp water. A runner arrives, slipping twice before reaching them. "Message from command," the boy says, handing over a damp piece of paper. Weiss unfolds it carefully. "All units report, enemy artillery remains active. Supply lines intact. Expect continued pressure." Weiss clenches his jaw, still intact. He murmurs, the young replacement beside him shakes his head. "How?" "Our reconnaissance said their vehicles couldn't get through." Weiss looks out toward the distant rumble of engines, faint, but unmistakable. "They're making their own roads," he says quietly, the words hang in the air, heavy with implication. Back on the Allied side, Callahan walks along the newly laid stretch, inspecting the work. Another truck passes him, its tires creaking over the wooden planks. The driver gives a quick thumbs up before disappearing into the fog. A private nearby struggles with a plank, nearly dropping it. "Careful." Callahan snaps, then softens his tone. "We're all that's keeping them supplied up there. You understand?" The private nods, breathing hard. "Yes, sir." Callahan glances toward the front lines, though they are hidden beyond miles of rain and smoke. He knows what's happening up there. The infantry keeps advancing. The artillery keeps firing, and all of it depends on this. Mud-covered men. Wooden planks. Machines that refuse to quit. This is the war behind the war. Suddenly, a distant explosion ripples through the ground. Then another. Callahan freezes. "Counter-battery fire?" the sergeant asks. Callahan listens. "The pattern is wrong." "No," he says slowly. "That's ours." Somewhere ahead, Allied artillery is opening up again, uninterrupted, precise, relentless. Despite everything, Weiss hears it too. The sound rolls across the battlefield like thunder, deep and constant. He grips his rifle tighter, knuckles white. "They shouldn't have ammunition left," the young soldier whispers. Weiss doesn't answer, because deep down, he's beginning to understand something far more dangerous than any weapon. The enemy is not slowing down. If anything, they are becoming more efficient. As night begins to fall, the rain continues its endless assault. The mud grows deeper. The cold sharpens, and still, the engines run. Still, the guns fire. Still, the soldiers move forward, through conditions that should have stopped an army, through terrain that should have broken a campaign, they keep coming, and the line between possible and impossible begins to dissolve in the mud. November 21, 1944. Approaches to the Hurtgen forest, German border, dawn never truly arrives, only a gray, lifeless light filtering through rain clouds and drifting smoke. Sergeant Michael Donnelly of the U.S. 3rd Armored Division leans halfway out of his Sherman tank turret, wiping mud from his goggles with a gloved hand. It's useless. The moment he clears them, more filth splashes up from the churning ground below. Driver, keep her steady, he shouts into the hull. Inside, the driver fights the controls as the tank lurches violently, one track sinking deep before clawing its way back up. The engine roars, straining against the weight of mud that clings to the hull like wet cement. Feels like she's gonna bog down. Sarge, the driver yells back. Donnelly scans the terrain ahead. It's a nightmare, shell craters filled with brown water, broken trees, shattered earth that gives way under even a man's weight. And yet, just ahead, another Sherman is already pushing through, its tracks grinding forward inch by inch. Follow their line, Donnelly orders. Stay in their tracks. It's the only way. Where one tank has passed, the ground is, barely, more stable. A path carved not by roads, but by sheer force. Behind them, infantry advance in tight formation, stepping where the tanks step. One misstep off that narrow track, and a man can sink to his knees, or worse. Private Harper is among them. His legs burn with exhaustion as he carefully places each foot into the deep impressions left by the tank ahead. The mud tries to pull his boots off with every step, sucking and dragging like something alive. A soldier beside him slips, falling hard. Harper grabs his arm, hauling him back up. Stay in the tracks. Harper shouts over the engine noise. The man nods, breathless. Yeah, they keep moving, because stopping means falling behind. And falling behind means being exposed. Across the line, Oberstleutnant Karl Weiss watches the tanks through a break in the trees. His breath fogs in the cold air as he steadies his rifle against a splintered trunk. They're bringing armor through this, the young soldier beside him asks, disbelief clear in his voice. Weiss doesn't answer immediately. He's too focused on what he's seeing. The Shermans are not fast. Not graceful. But they are relentless. Their tracks churn endlessly, gripping whatever they can, crushing the ground beneath them into something usable. One tank slows, nearly stops, as its front dips into a crater. For a moment, it looks trapped. Weiss tightens his grip. Now, he whispers. A German anti-tank gun fires from a concealed position. The shell streaks across the battlefield, and misses. The tank lurches forward again, climbing out of the crater with a deafening roar. Its turret begins to turn. Reload, a German voice shouts, but it's too late. The Sherman fires. The impact slams into the German position, sending earth and splintered wood into the air. The gun falls silent. Weiss flinches, ducking instinctively as debris rains down. They just keep coming, the young soldier mutters, his voice shaking. Donnelly exhales slowly, watching the explosion ahead. Target down, his gunner confirms. Keep moving, Donnelly replies. There's no celebration. No pause. Just the next objective. Mud splashes up against the hull as the tank pushes forward again. The engine screams, but it holds. Somehow, it always holds. Behind them, more vehicles follow, half-tracks, supply carriers, even artillery pieces being dragged through terrain that should have stopped them cold. A radio crackles inside the tank. Advance elements report resistance weakening. Continue push. Donnelly smirks faintly. You hear that? They're cracking. The driver doesn't respond. He's too busy keeping them from sinking. Weiss hears the same truth in a different way. The line is thinning. Positions that should have held for days are collapsing in hours. Not because of overwhelming force, but because the enemy refuses to be slowed. Mud was supposed to be their ally. The rain, their shield. Instead, it has become meaningless. They're not fighting the ground, Weiss says quietly. They're using it. The young soldier looks at him, confused. Weiss gestures toward the advancing tanks, the infantry moving in their wake, the distant rumble of engines that never seems to fade. They adapt faster than we do, he continues. That's the difference. A sudden barrage of artillery crashes down behind the German line, shaking the earth violently. Trees splinter. Mud erupts in towering columns. Weiss drops flat, covering his head as the world explodes around him. The bombardment is precise. Sustained, supplied. When it finally lifts, the silence feels unnatural. Weiss slowly raises his head, ears ringing. Through the smoke and rain, he sees them again, the Americans, still advancing, still closing the distance. Harper feels the ground tremble from the artillery, but he doesn't stop. He can't. The tank ahead of him moves forward. So he follows. One step. Then another, through mud that should have swallowed him whole, through a battlefield that should have stopped them all, and yet, it hasn't. Weiss grips his rifle tighter, a cold realization settling in his chest. This is no longer just a battle of weapons. It is a battle of endurance. Of logistics. Of will. And in this kind of war, the side that keeps moving wins. November 24, 1944. Allied artillery position, west of the Hurtgen Forest. The ground shakes with every shot. Staff Sergeant Robert, Red, Kincaid slams another shell into the breech of a 105 mm howitzer, his gloves slick with mud and grease. The crew moves like a machine, trained, efficient, relentless. Fire. The gun recoils violently, its blast cutting through the damp air. A shockwave ripples across the muddy clearing, briefly scattering the rain into mist. Just 2 degrees left. The fire direction center calls out over the field phone. Kincaid doesn't hesitate. You heard it. Traverse left. The crew pivots the gun, boots slipping but never stopping. Another shell is loaded, another shot fired, again, and again. There is no pause. Miles away, Oberstfreiter Karl Weiss presses himself against the earth as the bombardment intensifies. The shells land with terrifying accuracy, walking steadily across the German defensive line. They're zeroing in. Someone shouts. Weiss grits his teeth. They never stopped firing. That's the part he cannot understand. In this weather, in this terrain, artillery should falter. Ammunition should run low. Guns should fall silent as supply lines choke in the mud, but the Allied guns only grow louder, more frequent, more precise. Back at the artillery position, a convoy struggles into view. Trucks coated in layers of mud so thick their original color is barely visible. One of them skids slightly before finding purchase on a reinforced path of wooden planks and crushed stone. Ammo truck. A soldier calls out. Kincaid glances over his shoulder just long enough to see crates being unloaded. About time, he mutters, then immediately turns back to his work. Keep it moving. We're not done yet. A young private pries open a crate, revealing rows of fresh shells, gleaming dully despite the grime around them. How are we still getting this stuff up here? He asks, almost to himself. Kincaid doesn't look at him. Because someone back there is working just as hard as we are. That someone is Lieutenant James Callahan. Now further forward than before, he stands beside a stretch of newly reinforced road, if it can even be called that. Layers of timber, gravel, and crushed debris have been packed together to create something that resembles stability. Barely. A truck rumbles past him, its suspension creaking under the weight of ammunition. Another follows, then another. Callahan watches them go, his face streaked with mud, eyes hollow from lack of sleep. Sir, a sergeant approaches. We've got reports the next is worse. Flooded out completely. Callahan exhales slowly. Then we build over it. With what? Callahan looks around, at the broken trees, the wreckage of war scattered across the land, with whatever we have left. At the front, the effects are unmistakable. Donnelly's Sherman pauses briefly behind a ridge as artillery shells scream overhead, slamming into German positions ahead. God, I love those guns, the driver mutters. Donnelly nods. Yeah, and they're not running dry anytime soon. He knows why, because no matter how bad the ground gets, the supply keeps coming. Weiss knows it too. He crawls through a trench that is barely holding together, water pooling at the bottom, turning it into a freezing channel of mud. Around him, men huddle low, exhausted and shaken. A lieutenant nearby grips a field radio, shouting into it, we need counter-battery fire. They're hitting us non-stop. Static crackles in response. Then silence. Weiss doesn't need to hear the answer. There isn't one. German artillery, once so dominant, now fires in scattered bursts, limited, cautious. Ammunition is scarce. Movement is difficult. Every shell must count, but the Allies, they fire like they have no limits at all. Another barrage crashes down, closer this time. The trench trembles violently. A section collapses, sending mud cascading down. Weiss grabs the young soldier beside him, pulling him clear just as debris buries the spot where he had been seconds before. Stay low. Weiss shouts. The soldier nods frantically, eyes wide with fear. They won't stop, he whispers. Weiss looks toward the distant flashes of Allied guns, barely visible through the rain. No, he says quietly. They won't. Back at the artillery line, Kincaid wipes sweat and rain from his face, barely distinguishing between the two. How many rounds we fired? The private asks. Kincaid shrugs. Stopped counting. Another shell is loaded, another shot fired. The barrel glows faintly from heat despite the cold rain. Still, they continue, because they can, because the lifeline holds. Callahan watches the last truck of the convoy disappear into the mist. For a moment, he allows himself to stand still, just for a moment. Then he turns back to his men. All right, he says, voice steady despite the exhaustion. Let's keep building. At the front, Harper hears the guns and feels a strange sense of reassurance. As long as they're firing, they're not alone. He grips his rifle and moves forward once more, boots sinking, body aching, but spirit unbroken. And across the battlefield, Carl Weiss comes to a realization that chills him more than the rain ever could. The mud was supposed to stop an army. Instead, it has only slowed one. November 28, 1944. Forward German defensive line, near the edge of the Hurtgen forest. The mud is no longer just an obstacle. It is everywhere, inside boots. Inside rifles. Packed into the mechanisms of machine guns. Mixed with blood in the bottom of trenches. It swallows footprints as quickly as they are made, erasing any sense of direction. Oberstleutnant Carl Weiss drags himself along what remains of a trench line, his uniform stiff with dried mud layered over fresh wet filth. His hands are numb, his fingers cracked from cold and constant exposure. Report, he says, dropping beside a machine gun crew. The gunner shakes his head. Jammed again. Mud in the feed. Weiss curses under his breath. Clean it. Now. We just did. Another artillery shell lands nearby, shaking the ground violently. More mud collapses into the trench, burying equipment, half covering a fallen soldier who no one has time to move. Weiss looks down at the man for a brief second, then looks away. There is no time for anything except survival. Across the field, Sergeant Donnelly's Sherman crests a slight rise, if it can even be called that. The tank pauses, engine idling heavily, as the crew scans the terrain ahead. Looks like their line's falling back, the gunner says. Donnelly narrows his eyes. Or pulling us in. Either way, it doesn't matter, keep advancing. The tank lurches forward again, tracks grinding deep into the mud. Behind it, infantry follow, stepping carefully in its wake. Private Harper stumbles, catching himself on the tank's rear hull. He takes a breath, steadying himself, then keeps moving. Every step feels heavier than the last, but the line ahead is closer now. Suddenly, machine gun fire erupts from a concealed German position. Contact front, someone shouts. Harper drops instantly, pressing into the mud as bullets snap overhead. The tank's turret begins to rotate, searching. Where is it? Donnelly demands. Tree line, left side. The gunner replies, on it. The Sherman fires. The explosion tears into the trees, splintering wood and sending debris flying. The machine gun falls silent. Move. Harper's lieutenant yells. Push through. They rise and advance again, adrenaline cutting through exhaustion. Weiss hears the blast and knows exactly what it means. Another position gone, another gap in the line. He crawls toward a forward observation point, peering through the rain. What he sees confirms his fear. They're pushing through the center, he mutters. A lieutenant beside him nods grimly. Orders are to hold. With what? Weiss snaps, gesturing at the collapsing trench, the exhausted men, the failing weapons. The lieutenant doesn't answer, because there is no answer. Behind the Allied lines, the effort continues without pause. Lieutenant Callahan stands knee-deep in a flooded of road, directing men as they lay down more materials. Anything they can find, bring that timber over here, he shouts. A bulldozer pushes forward, nearly stalling as water rises around its tracks. Don't stop, Callahan yells. If it stops, it sinks. The operator guns the engine, and the machine surges forward just enough to stay afloat on the unstable ground. Another truck inches past, loaded with ammunition, another lifeline secured. At the artillery position, Kincaid's crew continues firing, the rhythm never breaks. Load, fire, adjust, repeat. The private from earlier looks exhausted, his movement slower now. How much longer? He asks. Kincaid doesn't even look at him. As long as they need us. And how long is that? Kincaid finally glances up, eyes hard. Until this war's over. Back at the front, the pressure is becoming unbearable. Weiss moves between positions, trying to coordinate what little defense remains. Fall back to secondary line. An officer shouts, there is no secondary line. Someone else yells back, and it's true, every fallback position has already been compromised by the same relentless advance. Mud did not stop them, rain did not slow them enough, nothing did. Harper reaches the edge of the German trench line, heart pounding. He vaults over the lip, landing hard in the mud below. For a moment, everything is chaos. Shouts. Gunfire. Explosions, then, silence. The position is abandoned. Harper looks around, breathing heavily. Weapons lie scattered. Packs left behind. Signs of a hurried retreat. They're pulling back. Someone shouts. Weiss hears those same words, but from the other side. Retreat. Fall back. The order spreads quickly, carried by desperate voices. Weiss hesitates for only a second, then moves, because staying means being overrun, and for the first time, that outcome feels inevitable. As he retreats through the mud, slipping and stumbling, Weiss glances back one last time, through the rain, through the smoke. He sees them, the Allied soldiers, advancing steadily, unstoppable. The ground that was meant to protect them has failed. The conditions that should have saved them have turned against them, and the realization is undeniable now. This is no longer a battle they can control. The mud belongs to the side that refuses to be stopped by it. December 3, 1944. Forward positions, near the Roar River. Night falls, but the battle does not. Rain turns to a cold drizzle, hanging in the air like a mist that clings to everything. Visibility drops to almost nothing. Shapes become shadows. Sounds become threats. Private First Class Daniel Harper crouches low beside a hedgerow, his breath shallow, rifle clutched tightly in his hands. The mud is colder now, seeping through his uniform, draining what little warmth remains. Hold here, his lieutenant whispers. We move on my signal. Harper nods, though he can barely see the man's face in the darkness. Somewhere ahead, faint voices in German drift through the night. They're close, too close. A few hundred meters away, Oberstfreiter Karl Weiss moves cautiously through the ruins of a shattered hamlet. What once were homes are now hollow shells, walls blown open, roofs collapsed, floors turned to mud. He pauses, listening. At night, the battlefield changes. Movement is slower. Every sound carries farther. Every mistake is amplified. A soldier behind him whispers, do you think they'll stop? Weiss shakes his head, even though the man can't see it. No, he says quietly. They never do. Back along the Allied line, a column of vehicles creeps forward in near total darkness. Headlights are covered, reduced to thin slits of light barely illuminating the ground ahead. A corporal walks in front of the lead truck, guiding it step by step. Easy, easy, he murmurs, placing each foot carefully. The driver follows his movements exactly. One wrong turn, one moment of hesitation, and the vehicle could slide off the narrow reinforced path into deep mud, lost for hours, maybe days. Behind them, more trucks wait, engines idling, always moving. Lieutenant Callahan stands off to the side, watching the pass. His eyes are bloodshot, his movements slower now, but he refuses to leave his post. A sergeant approaches. Sir, you should get some rest. Callahan shakes his head. Not while they're still moving. The sergeant glances at the line of trucks disappearing into the darkness. They don't stop, do they? Callahan looks out into the night. No, he says. And neither do we. At the front, Harper hears it before he sees it. Engines, low, steady, approaching. His lieutenant leans in. That's ours. Armor's coming up. A faint sense of relief washes over Harper. Even in the darkness, even in the mud, support is arriving, right on time. Weiss hears the same sound, and feels something very different. Dread, tanks, one of his men whispers. In this, another replies, disbelief clear in his voice. Weiss doesn't answer, because he already knows the truth. Yes, even in this, moments later, the first Sherman emerges from the darkness like a moving shadow, its engine rumbling low and powerful. Mud drips from its hull as it advances, slow but unstoppable. Donnelly stands in the turret, scanning ahead with narrowed eyes. Keep it steady, he says into the tank. Watch for movement. The driver nods, barely visible in the dim interior. Infantry follows close behind, sticking to the tank's path just as they have during the day. Harper moves with them, every sense on edge. Suddenly, a flash. A German anti-tank weapon fires from the ruins ahead. The round slams into the mud just short of the tank, throwing up a massive spray of earth. Contact. Donnelly shouts. Front. The turret swings toward the flash. Fire. The Sherman's gun erupts, lighting up the night in a blinding burst. The shell crashes into the ruined building, collapsing what remains of it in a cloud of debris. Silence follows, then, movement resumes. Weiss ducks behind a broken wall, heart racing. The failed shot echoes in his mind. They're bringing tanks through at night now, the young soldier whispers, voice trembling. Weiss grips his rifle tighter. They're not giving us time, he says, not time to recover, not time to regroup, not even time to think. Back on the Allied side, the advance continues. Harper steps over rubble, boots sinking into mud between broken stones. The tank ahead crushes what remains of the path, creating something barely passable behind it. Keep moving, the lieutenant urges. No1 argues. Further back, the convoy never stops. Truck after truck moves through the darkness, guided by dim lights and exhausted men on foot. Some slide dangerously close to the edge of the path before correcting, but they keep going, because they must. At the artillery line, Kincaid's crew fires again. Even at night, even in the rain, the flashes illuminate their faces briefly, mud-streaked, hollow-eyed, but determined. Fire. The shell disappears into the darkness. Moments later, an explosion answers from miles away. Weiss hears it, feels it, another reminder that the enemy is not slowing down, not even in the dark. As the night stretches on, the pattern becomes clear. There is no pause. No relief. No moment where the battlefield rests. The Allies advance by day, they advance by night, they move through mud, through darkness, through everything that should have stopped them. Weiss leans back against the cold stone, staring into the blackness ahead. For the first time, a thought forms that he cannot ignore. If they never stop, then when do we? December 10, 1944. German defensive sector, east of the Ruhr River. The rain finally stops. For the first time in weeks, the sky clears, cold, pale, and empty. Frost begins to form over the churned battlefield, hardening the surface that had once been an endless sea of mud. Oberstfreiter Karl Weiss kneels, pressing his gloved hand against the ground. It no longer swallows his fingers. Instead, it resists, frozen. He looks up slowly, scanning the terrain. This might help us, the young soldier beside him says, hope creeping into his voice. Weiss doesn't answer right away. He studies the land, the hardened tracks, the now still craters. Weeks ago, this would have been an advantage. Now, I'm not sure it matters anymore, Weiss says quietly. Across the line, Sergeant Donnelly notices it too. His Sherman rolls forward with less resistance, its tracks gripping the firmer ground with ease. Well, I'll be damned, the driver mutters. She's actually moving smooth. Donnelly allows himself a small grin. About time. The tank picks up speed, just slightly, but enough to make a difference. The slow crawl through mud becomes a steady advance. Behind them, infantry moves faster, no longer forced to step precisely in the tracks. Private Harper feels it immediately. For the first time in days, his boots don't sink. He almost stumbles, not from the mud, but from the sudden lack of it. Keep spacing, the lieutenant calls out. Don't bunch up. They spread out, moving more freely now, faster, further back. The change transforms everything. Lieutenant Callahan stands beside what used to be a nightmare stretch of road. Now, under the cold air, it has hardened into something almost recognizable. Trucks move more confidently, engines no longer screaming under constant strain. A driver leans out his window, grinning. Feels like a highway compared to yesterday. Callahan nods, but his expression remains serious. Don't get comfortable, he says. It won't last forever. But even he knows, this changes the pace of the war. At the artillery positions, Kincaid's crew works with renewed efficiency. Shells are moved faster. Guns are repositioned with less effort. Easier day, huh? The young private says. Kincaid shakes his head. No such thing. He gestures toward the front. It just means we can hit them harder. Weiss hears that harder, in real time. The artillery barrage begins earlier than expected. He flinches as the first shells land, but something is different now. They're coming faster, more concentrated, more accurate. They're increasing fire. A soldier shouts. Weiss grips the edge of the trench, now firmer, less prone to collapse, but offering little comfort. They've been waiting for this, he realizes. The mud had slowed them. Now nothing does. Moments later, the ground begins to tremble again, but this time, it's not just artillery. It's engines, louder than before, more numerous. Weiss peers over the edge of the trench and feels his stomach tighten. Tanks, not crawling, advancing. Donnelly's Sherman leads the push, moving with a confidence it hasn't had in weeks. The engine roars steadily, no longer fighting against the earth. Full advance, Donnelly orders. Let's keep pressure on them. The tank surges forward, followed by others. Infantry moves alongside, keeping pace. Harper runs now, actually runs, his legs protesting after days of slow, grinding movement, but he doesn't stop. None of them do. The German line begins to react, but too slowly. Weiss shouts orders, trying to coordinate a defense. Anti-tank teams, forward. Machine guns, cover the approach. But the timing is off, the rhythm is broken. For weeks, everything had been measured in slow, painful movements. Now, everything is happening too fast. A German anti-tank weapon fires. This time, it hits. The shell slams into the side of a Sherman, rocking it violently. Hit, someone shouts, but the tank doesn't stop. Smoke pours from its side, but its turret continues to rotate. Return fire. Donnelly commands from a nearby tank. Another blast. The German position disappears in an explosion of dirt and debris. Weiss watches in disbelief. They're still moving, the young soldier says, voice hollow. Even when hit, even under fire, they keep advancing. Behind the lines, the supply continues to surge forward, now faster than ever. Trucks that once crawled now roll steadily. Artillery that once struggled now dominates. Men who once trudged now push forward with renewed speed. Callahan stands at the roadside, watching for the first time. He allows himself a small, tired smile. We've got momentum, the sergeant beside him says. Callahan nods. Yeah, he replies. And now we don't let go. At the front, Harper reaches another abandoned German position. Again, another line broken, another retreat. Weiss pulls back with his unit, breathing hard, boots striking against frozen ground instead of sinking into it. It should feel like an advantage. Instead, it feels like the end of one. He glances back one last time. The battlefield is no longer a swamp. It is open, exposed. And the enemy is moving faster than ever. The weather had been their ally, then it became irrelevant. Now, it has turned against them completely. December 16, 1944. Ardennes region, near the German frontier. The cold has settled in fully now. Frost grips the ground at dawn, turning the scarred earth into something hard, almost brittle. What was once mud that swallowed men whole has become a surface that carries them forward, faster than ever before. Private First Class Daniel Harper moves at a steady pace, breath visible in sharp bursts. His gear feels lighter now, not because it weighs less, but because the ground no longer fights him with every step. Ahead, the stretches forward, infantry, armor, vehicles, all moving with a speed that would have been impossible just days ago. Keep it tight, his lieutenant calls. We're covering more ground now. Harper nods, eyes scanning the tree line. Everything feels different, faster, closer. Several kilometers ahead, Oberstleutnant Karl Weiss scrambles to reposition with what remains of his unit. The orders have changed again. Fall back, regroup, establish a new defensive line, but the problem is no longer just manpower. It's distance. Or rather, the lack of it. They're reaching positions too quickly, a German officer says, unfolding a map with shaking hands. We don't have time to reinforce between lines. Weiss studies the map. The gaps are growing, not because they're losing faster, but because the enemy is closing in faster. Back with Donnelly's armored column, the difference is unmistakable. Feels like we're finally fighting a real advance, the driver says. Donnelly nods. This is what it was supposed to look like. The Sherman rolls forward at a steady pace, no longer lurching or sinking. Tracks grip firmly. The engine hums instead of roars. Contact could be anywhere now, the gunner warns. Donnelly scans the horizon. Stay sharp. Because speed cuts both ways, behind them, the logistics chain is no longer just surviving, it's accelerating. Lieutenant Callahan watches as trucks roll past in near continuous, their spacing tighter, their movement smoother, convoy spacing down to half. A sergeant reports. We're doubling throughput. Callahan exhales slowly. Weeks of struggle, weeks of building roads plank by plank, dragging vehicles through mud, salvaging every stuck axle, now paying off all at once. Keep it moving, he says. No bottlenecks. Because now, speed is the weapon. At the artillery line, Kincaid feels it too. Fire missions are coming in faster, the private says, flipping through coordinates. Kincaid nods. Because they're moving faster. Another shell is loaded. Fire. The gun recoils, again, the tempo increases, not chaotic, but controlled. Like a machine finally running at full capacity. Weiss hears the results before he sees the cause. Artillery impacts land closer together now, more coordinated, walking across positions with terrifying efficiency. They're adjusting quicker, a soldier says. Weiss grips his rifle. They're observing more, he replies. Forward observers. Radios. Coordination, all supported by a supply chain that no longer struggles to keep up. Suddenly, the sound of engines rises again, closer than expected. Weiss looks up sharply. That's too fast, he mutters. Moments later, the first Allied scouts appear at the edge of the head, far sooner than German command had predicted. Contact front, someone shouts. Panic flickers through the line. They weren't supposed to be here yet. Harper sees the same village from the opposite side. There, his lieutenant signals. Enemy positions. No hesitation, advance. They move in quickly, rifles raised. Donnelly's tank follows, turret already rotating toward likely targets. Gunfire erupts, short. Intense, but not prolonged, because the distance between encounter and engagement has shrunk. There is less warning, less preparation, less time to react. Weiss fires from behind a stone wall, returning shots as Allied infantry push into the village. But the pressure builds almost instantly. They're already flanking. A soldier shouts, "How?" Another yells. Weiss doesn't answer. He knows. Speed. A Sherman rounds the corner of a street, its presence sudden and overwhelming. Panzerfaust. Someone cries out. A German soldier fires. The shot hits. The tank jolts, but continues moving. Donnelly grips the edge of the turret. Hit but mobile. The driver reports, "Keep going." Donnelly orders, because stopping now means losing momentum. The tank pushes forward, supporting infantry as they clear the remaining resistance. Within minutes, the village is theirs. Weiss retreats again, breathing hard, boots striking against frozen ground. Another position lost, another line bypassed, not because it was weak, but because it was reached too quickly. Behind the front, Callahan watches another convoy pass. Frontline reports rapid advance. A radio operator tells him. Callahan nods. They've outrun the mud, he says. At the artillery line, Kincaid wipes his hands, already preparing for the next fire mission. They're not slowing down, the private says. Kincaid looks toward the horizon. No, he replies. Now they're speeding up. And at the front, Harper moves through the captured village, barely pausing before receiving the next order. Keep pushing. Always forward. Weiss stops briefly at the edge of a tree lean, looking back at the rising from the village they just lost. For weeks, distance had been their ally. Mud had stretched it, rain had protected it. Now, it's gone. The battlefield has shrunk. The enemy arrives faster than expected, engages sooner than prepared for, breaks through before defenses can stabilize, and for the first time, Weiss understands the full weight of it. This is no longer a slow war. This is a race, and they are losing it. January 3, 1945. Western Front, west of the Rhine. Snow now covers the battlefield in a thin, deceptive layer. Beneath it, the scars remain, frozen ruts, shattered, the hardened remains of what had once been endless mud. The cold bites deeper than the rain ever did, but it does nothing to slow the advance. Private First Class Daniel Harper moves cautiously along a ridgeline, boots crunching lightly over frost. The air is sharp, clean in a way that feels almost wrong after weeks of mud and decay. Watch your footing, his lieutenant says. Ice under the snow. Harper nods, adjusting his grip on his rifle. Ahead, another German line, Oberstfreiter Karl Weiss crouches behind a hastily reinforced position, his breath steady but his eyes hollow with exhaustion. The trench here is shallow, dug into frozen ground that resisted every shovel strike. Is this where we hold? The young soldier asks quietly. Weiss looks around. There are fewer men now, less equipment, less everything, but the orders are clear. Yes, he says, even if he doesn't believe it. Behind the Allied lines, everything moves with precision. Convoys roll forward in organized waves. Engineers maintain roads that are now firm enough to support constant traffic. Artillery units reposition quickly, keeping pace with the advancing infantry. Lieutenant Callahan stands beside a map spread across the hood of a jeep, fronts moving faster than projected. A radio operator reports. Callahan studies they're collapsing. He says simply, not breaking in one place, but everywhere at once. The artillery line. Kincaid's crew fires again. The rhythm hasn't changed. But the targets have. They're closer now, the private says, checking coordinates. Kincaid nods. Good. Another shell is loaded. Fire. The gun recoils. The war continues. Donnelly's Sherman rolls into position behind a low rise, engine idling. Final line before the river, the gunner says. Donnelly nods slowly. Then we finish it here. Back on the German side, Weiss hears the artillery begin again, closer than ever, more precise than ever. He grips his rifle, forcing himself to stay focused. Get ready, he tells his men.no speeches. No false hope, just the reality of what's coming. Moments later, the barrage lifts, and the advance begins. Harper moves forward with his unit, pounding as they crest the ridge. Ahead, German positions come into view, thin, exposed, fragile. Move, the lieutenant orders. They advance at a steady pace, no longer slowed by terrain, no longer uncertain. This is what they've been pushing toward. Weiss opens fire. The first shots crack through the cold air, answered immediately by return fire. For a brief moment, it feels like a battle again. A real one. Not a slow grind, not a collapse, but a fight. Donnelly sees the flashes ahead. Enemy contact, he says calmly. Engage. The Sherman fires, the explosion tears into the defensive line, another tank joins in, then another. Artillery follows, precise, coordinated, relentless. Weiss ducks as explosions ripple across the position. Snow and dirt erupt together, raining down in a frozen hold. An officer shouts, but the line is already bending. Harper reaches the edge of the German defenses, vaulting into the trench as chaos unfolds around him. Gunfire, shouts, close combat, but it doesn't last long. Because the pressure is too much. Weiss sees it happen in real time. One section falls back, then another. A gap opens, and once it does, it cannot be closed. Retreat, someone yells, again, always the same word now. Weiss hesitates for a fraction of a second, then turns and runs with the others, because staying means being surrounded, and there is no strength left to hold. Behind them, the Allied advance continues without pause. Harper climbs out of the trench, breathing hard, looking ahead. There is no immediate resistance, only the next objective. Donnelly's tank rolls forward again. Keep pushing, he says. No hesitation. No delay. Callahan watches the reports come in. Enemy line collapsing across multiple sectors. He nods once. That's it, he says quietly. The artillery line. Kincaid fires another round. Think this is the last push? The private asks. Kincaid doesn't answer right away. He looks toward the distant horizon, then, feels like it. Weiss reaches a tree line, finally slowing, breath ragged. He turns back one last time. The line they were supposed to hold, gone. For weeks, they had relied on the land, the mud, the weather, the distance. All of it had failed. Now, there is nothing left to slow the enemy, nothing left to hold them back. And as the Allied forces continue their relentless advance toward the Rhine, one truth becomes undeniable. The war, on this front, is nearly over. March 7, 1945. Remagen, west bank of the Rhine River. Smoke drifts low over the water. Private First Class Daniel Harper stands at the edge of the riverbank, staring across the Rhine. The current moves steadily beneath a gray sky, carrying debris downstream, broken, fragments of, remnants of a retreat that never quite held together, and there, still standing against all odds, a bridge. Is that intact? Someone whispers. Harper squints. Yes, the Ludendorff Bridge. Further back, Sergeant Michael Donnelly leans out from his Sherman turret, disbelief etched across his face. They didn't blow it, the driver asks. Donnelly shakes his head slowly. Looks like they tried, blackened mark where demolition charges had failed to fully destroy the structure. Smoke curls from damaged, but the span remains passable. On the far side, Oberstfreiter Karl Weiss stumbles into position with a scattered group of German soldiers. His uniform is torn, his face gaunt, his movement slower now, not from mud, not from exhaustion alone, but from something deeper, finality. They're going to take it, the young soldier beside him says, voice hollow. Weiss doesn't respond. He doesn't need to. Orders are shouted. Confusion spreads. Some units prepare to defend the bridge. Others prepare to destroy it. Too late for both. Back on the western bank, officers gather quickly. Voices urgent. We take it now, or we lose it. Harper hears the pass down the line. Advance to the bridge. No hesitation. No time to think. The first men move forward at a run, across open ground, toward the bridge. Weiss watches them come. Through his rifle sights, he sees figures emerging from smoke moving fast, determined, unstoppable. They're not even slowing down. The young soldier mutters. Weiss exhales slowly. No, he says. They never did. Machine gun fire erupts from the eastern bank, bullets striking kicking up sparks and splinters. The structure trembles under the impacts, but still stands. Harper sprints forward with the others, boots pounding against, heart hammering in his chest. Go! 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 Someone shouts. Donnelly's tank rolls forward behind the infantry, stopping just short of the bridge approach. Cover them, he orders. The Sherman fires. The shell slams into a German position near the far bank, silencing it instantly. Another tank joins in, then another. Artillery begins to fall beyond the river, cutting off reinforcements, isolating the defenders. Kincaid's guns, miles away, are still firing. Still supplying the push. Weiss ducks as explosions ripple behind him. The shakes, the air filled with smoke and dust. He looks up again, and sees them reaching the bridge. Harper steps onto the structure, boots striking metal and wood instead of mud for the first time in weeks. The sound feels strange, almost unreal. He doesn't stop, none of them do. They move across, exposed, vulnerable, but unstoppable. German attempt to regroup, to form but it's fragmented, disorganized. Too many retreats, too little time, too much pressure. Weiss raises his rifle, fires. Once, twice, then lowers it. The line is gone, the behind them is gone. The war, for them, is ending. Harper reaches the far side of the bridge, dropping behind cover as more soldiers pour across behind him. We made it, someone shouts. But there's no celebration, only movement, always forward. Donnelly watches as infantry secure the far bank. He exhales slowly. All that mud, his driver mutters. All that fighting. Donnelly nods, and it didn't stop a damn thing. Behind them, the of men and machines continues across the bridge, trucks, tanks, artillery, the entire weight of the Allied war machine, still moving, still advancing. Callahan stands on the western bank, watching the crossing begin. For weeks, he had fought a different battle, against mud, against impossibility. Now, he watches they kept it moving. The sergeant beside him says. Callahan nods. Yeah, he replies quietly. That's what won it. On the far side, Weiss turns away from the river. There is nothing left to hold, nothing left to delay. The enemy he once believed could be stopped by terrain, by weather, by distance, has proven otherwise. They moved through mud like it was nothing. They built roads where none existed. They supplied guns that never fell silent. They advanced when stopping would have been easier, and in the end, that made all the difference. The Rhine has been crossed. The final barrier has fallen, and the war in the West is entering its chapter.